So I'm sure many of you have heard this, and this is something that, for lack of better words, kind of bothers me, maybe aggravates me a little bit. But things like, man, you got to do this exercise or that exercise or whatever. And for example, one of the things I've heard is, the deadlift. You have to deadlift. Somehow, I had a client come up to me and they were like, well, I read this book and it told me the deadlift was the king of all lifts. And it was the one exercise I should be doing. And they rattled off some assortment of reasons that that article or book or whatever he heard provided. It was things like, the hormonal benefit of deadlifting, which is hilarious to me, right? As if some exercise has an innate hormonal response benefit, like as if doing a hinge pattern, like an exercise, is all of a sudden gonna magically boost your hormones. That doesn't make any sense. My reason to not get too distracted, but why any exercise has any specific hormonal response is going to be basically due to the sheer number of motor units activated, so how many muscles are actually working, and to what output or extent they're working. So by nature, a deadlift, which requires you to hold a really heavy bar and pick it up, obviously is going to activate many different motor units in the body, quite a bit, large amount of central drive, a lot of effort coming from the brain, and you got to pick it up. And so it's going to have a big stress response. And on the secondary to that is, does that acute hormonal effect even produce positive adaptations, and is that a causality to your gains that you see? And that's wishy-washy at times, heavily debated if that actual anabolic effect or quote-unquote presence of more anabolic hormones, when looked at in isolation, is actually causal to the gains that you see, or is it something that takes place over a longer time course? So it's not just the acute spike of hormones. Maybe the acute spike in hormones has a lot more to do with your immediate arousal states, how focused you are, right? Your glucocorticoids and your epinephrine and norepinephrine being released, catecholamines, couldn't think there for a second, being released has more of a means on some of your immediate arousal states, and even testosterone maybe playing a role in that as well. Is it anabolic? I don't know. So to make the claim that somehow this is the king of all lifts because the exercise itself has some unique method to it, it's kind of silly. I talked about that in a previous video where it's like, no, it's not about the magic woo and mystique of the exercise and how you're moving, but more the base principles and the neurophysiology behind it. But things like this bother me because it takes a very complicated process, a complicated thing, for example, like understanding why a hormonal response or why a big compound movement has benefits, but then labeling this one exercise as the king of all those exercises does it a disservice, because the maybe uninformed reader might not be able to draw parallels between that exercise and other exercises they can do that might evoke similar responses, right? So if I am reading that and think this is the king of all exercises, well, I'm be dead set on doing it. As a matter of fact, the deadlift has probably a lot more negatives to go with it than positives. It's highly technical. Yes, it has a lot of benefits, but if you're saying that you have to do it heavy, well, you're going to have a high level of technical security involved. In other words, someone who isn't really a well-versed lifter might have a technical proficiency to have the quote-unquote security or safety in the movement pattern to allow for max effort movements and still feel safe while doing it, because there's a lot of things, like any exercise, can go wrong, but I guess the deadlift probably has a little bit more of a risk factor involved due to the innate nature that the bar is in front of the center of mass and you're pulling it, and it's very easy to load the back and bend in a certain way that might be compromising. So again, kind of silly to just say, the deadlift is the end-all be-all. But again, the reason why is because it takes away from the benefits other exercises have, and that's what really bothers me. If we just told people it's not very exciting, it's not very ooh and ah, like, hey man, if you just did an exercise that was a high effort movement and you just sprinted every now and then, or did some jumps, or did some high output movements like a squat, whether it's a hack squat, a leg press, a safety bar squat, a Smith machine squat, I don't really care, or a variation of a deadlift, a dumbbell, a kettlebell, a rack pull, a trap bar. As long as you're using lots of muscles in a big compound movement, you're going to see some potentially more profound gains in the whole body adaptation because it's just a large stressor on the body as a whole. And so at the core of it all, it's understanding the principle, like why is that exercise even good in the first place? And then drawing the parallels. Okay, if that exercise is good for these base principles, right? Big muscle pattern, big movements, lots of muscles being used and a high level of output. What other exercises fall in that category? And it makes training and all this stuff and exercise selection way less confusing and also more welcoming because it opens the door to many different means and methods that you could possibly do. And so that's my 2 cents on this topic. I hate hearing, man, like this is the best exercise or that's the best exercise or this exercise is stupid or that exercise is stupid. Stop getting caught up in exercises and also maybe people in my position proclamating that such an exercise is superior to another maybe is doing a disservice to the general public. I just wanted to share that with y'all because that's my opinion on it. And if you guys have anything else you want to hear my opinion on, please comment below. I really enjoy these kind of pieces because it's an informal way for me to share some of my thoughts without getting overly granular in some of the information. And in the future, if you guys have topics you want to hear my opinion out, something that's kind of controversial or something that you're kind of chewing on from a thought standpoint, let me know. Comment below in the section here. Again, feel free to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. I appreciate you guys listening. I hope you enjoy. And always take care.